I knew something was off when I woke up at 2 a.m. in a quiet, cold room. But not because of the weather. The blanket next to me was empty, and in that half-asleep haze I heard his voice. Low, hurried, like he was trying to hide the whole world inside a secret phone call. My heart pounded, like my instincts were dragging me out of a dream. I had no idea my life was about to spiral into a whirlwind. A double-sided game, meticulously planned, with me as the pawn. But that night, for the first time, I began to hear the truth in whispers in the dark. My name is Nova, 34 years old, a civil attorney in Chicago, and I used to think I married the right man. Zachary, my husband, is a tech entrepreneur, smooth as sponge sugar, always knowing the right thing to say at the right time. We'd been married for 6 years. 6 years that seemed stable. Turned out to be a perfectly staged performance. And that night, the curtain began to tear. I sat up in the dark, didn't turn on the light, didn't make a sound. Zach's voice was coming from the hallway, so low I had to hold my breath to hear it clearly. Just a little while longer, she still doesn't suspect anything. I froze. She? Who? Who was he reassuring at 2 a.m. while his wife slept in the same house? My throat tightened. Every word hit me like a punch to the chest. I heard footsteps. He was coming back. I dove into bed like a thief, pulled the blanket up to my chin and pretended to be deep asleep. He climbed into bed, his faintly familiar cologne drifting into my nose. But for the first time in years, it felt foreign. "You asleep?" he whispered. Then, without waiting for an answer, turned to face me, placing a hand on my shoulder like nothing had happened. I didn't respond, but my mind was racing with 100 theories. The man beside me, the one I trusted, loved and called family, was lying. And I needed to know the truth. The next morning, Zach acted like nothing had happened. He made breakfast, kissed my cheek like every other day, and breezed through the kitchen with his phone in hand. But this time, I missed nothing. I noted every gesture, every glance. And when he left for work, I knew I couldn't sit still any longer. I opened my laptop, logged into our bank account. I wasn't one to check our finances often. Zach was better at that, so I'd always let him handle most of the investments. But this time, I needed to see it for myself. My eyes scanned the transaction history and every line made me shiver. $480. Internal transfer. $950. ATM withdrawal in Phoenix, Arizona. $2,100. Unidentified spending. $700. Pay me tech holdings? Never heard of it. I bit my lip, double-checked everything. These transactions had been going on for the past 3 months. Not large enough to raise suspicion, but consistent like clockwork. Like someone was trying to quietly bleed the money out, without attracting attention. I took screenshots, saved every piece of evidence. A chill ran down my spine. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was sure. And then, that evening, a golden opportunity presented itself. Zach left his phone on the table when he went to shower. Screen down like always. But this time, it lit up with a new message. I didn't want to be a spy. But I couldn't keep being blind in my own marriage either. I gently tilted the phone, read the preview. Just make sure she still doesn't know anything. Everything's almost done. Ilya Morrow. I froze. My heart stopped. Who is Ilya Morrow? And what the hell is almost done? There was no doubt anymore. Zach was hiding something big from me. And Ilya? Might be the key to uncovering everything. I placed the phone back exactly as it was, pretending to know nothing. But from that moment on, I'd made up my mind. If Zach was playing a double game, I wasn't going to be the one who lost. The next morning, Zach brewed coffee for both of us like he hadn't just pushed me to the edge of losing my mind. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the face of the man I used to trust completely. Now all I saw was someone I didn't recognize. He smiled, a fleeting smile like smoke, then sat across from me, placing a cup in front of me with a gesture so kind it felt fake. "I think we should have a serious talk," he said. I looked up, trying to keep my face neutral. Anything serious coming from him was never good news. "About what?" I asked, my voice flat like a frozen lake. Zach exhaled like what he was about to say made perfect sense, then placed his hand on the table, trying to make a connection I knew had died long ago. "I think we should reorganize our finances a bit, just in case something unexpected happens, accidents, illness, or unforeseen things." I almost laughed. The man scheming to drain his wife's assets was now teaching her how to prepare for the unexpected. "How exactly do you want to reorganize our finances?" "I just mean pulling everything together, that's all. You know, account lists, passwords, investments. We should keep it all in one place. If something happens to either of us, the other will know how to handle things." His voice was sweet as sugar, but his eyes couldn't hide the calculation. I swallowed a bitter sip of coffee. This fake concern gave me chills. I nodded, playing along. "Sure, I'll put it all together." He smiled. I smiled too. Two masked actors facing off in a brightly lit kitchen, like waiting for the final scene in a bad play. That night, Zach was strangely pleasant again. He cooked, opened wine, played soft jazz, and rested his hand on my waist like everything was perfect. I stiffened under his touch, wondering how many times in the past I had ignored that stiffness. Maybe he had been acting all along. The only difference was that back then, I'd been blind enough to applaud. After dinner, he went to his office, then returned with a light brown envelope. "I have something I'd like you to sign so we won't have to worry too much later." I frowned slightly. "What kind of paperwork?" "Just a few adjustments to our financial files, consolidating things for legal convenience," he said, handing me the documents. "You just need to sign at the end." I took the stack of papers. I didn't flip through them quickly like a wife who trusted her husband. I read line by line, eyes scanning each section while my stomach slowly tightened. Asset transfer, property ownership transfer, savings account, retirement investments. All transferred to Zachary. I looked up. He was smiling, staring straight at me without blinking. "Planning to sign it now?" I placed the file on the table, silently. Every move I made was measured against the fury I was barely containing. "This isn't a minor adjustment, this is all my assets. It's just a formality, you and I are one, why keep things separate anymore?" he said with a faint smile. But I could see the tension in the veins on his neck. "Then why the urgency, and why didn't you tell me beforehand?" His eyes darkened, his smile vanishing in a blink like someone flipped a switch. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Nova. Or maybe you're trying to take everything and leave me with nothing." Zach leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his voice suddenly dropping. "Cold as a verdict. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." A threat? No, it was a confession. I gave a faint, bitter smile, for the first time feeling like I had the upper hand in my own home. "Let me think about it," I said, flipping the file closed and placing it on the kitchen counter. "There's no rush, right?" Zach stared at me, then reluctantly nodded. "Right, just don't take too long." I left the living room, heading upstairs, heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't naive Nova anymore. From the moment I saw the name Ilya Morrow light up on his phone, I had snapped out of it. And I wasn't about to let some backstabbing man steal the life I had built from nothing. Zach thought he was smart. He'd never actually seen the real me. But he would. I sat alone in my office that night, the light from my laptop screen casting shadows on my tense face. The document Zach had given me still sat on the kitchen counter, where I had deliberately left it so he'd think I was still considering. But the moment I read, "transfer of ownership," his game was over. I didn't need more proof. Zach didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to strip me down to the last cent. And I, Nova Keller, was not going to let that happen. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, hair tied neatly, face unreadable. Inside me was a storm, but on the outside, I was myself. Professional, composed, and impossible to decipher. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew could keep a secret and was sharp enough to help me strike back. Clara Whitmore, financial attorney and my old friend from law school. Not many people knew I once helped Clara handle a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in the tech industry. And since then, we'd maintained a discreet but solid relationship. Nova, her voice was as sharp as ever. It's been a while. I need to move all my personal assets into a trust, as fast as possible. There was a brief silence on the other end. Zach? Yes, and I need him not to know until it's too late. Clara didn't ask any more questions. She understood. With someone like Zach, the only way to survive was to stay one step ahead. The next 3 days were a silent race. I quietly gathered everything. Account lists, property records, personal stocks, anything under my name. I created a new email, used solely for contacting Clara. I hired a third-party trustee, a law firm based in Austin, Texas, that Clara recommended, specializing in sensitive asset transfers. Step by step, every cent of my assets was pulled out of Zach's reach. I also reset my entire banking system, changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, moved savings to a separate bank, and completely severed all financial ties with Zach. With each move, one thing became clearer. I was no longer a victim. At night I still cooked, still smiled, still let Zach put his arm around me while we watched the news. He suspected nothing, still talked about upcoming trips, still asked if I needed help with his legally convenient paperwork. I nodded and said, "I'm still reviewing it." He had no idea I was flipping the board. A week later, everything was done. My personal assets, including a $580,000 investment from the law firm, the condo I owned before the marriage, and my retirement fund, were now fully protected in an independent, legal, and untouchable trust. Completely unrelated to any joint accounts with Zach. That night he brought out the folder again, placing it on the table like it was some romantic gesture. "You've read it, right?" Zach asked, voice soft as silk. I raised my wineglass, took a sip. "I have, I just need a little more time." He shrugged, not the least bit anxious. Because he thought he'd already won. "I just want everything tidy, in case life surprises us." I set my glass down, lips pressing into a faint line. "Yeah, I think so too." He didn't know that a life surprise was coming, and this time, he was the one about to be surprised. I went to bed early, leaving Zach with his laptop and his business call that was surely with Iliamaro. I didn't need to know the details anymore. I had passed the stage of pain and rage. Now, I was as calm as a scalpel in a surgeon's hand, cold, precise, and unwavering. Before closing my eyes, I opened the last email I'd sent Clara. The subject line was simple: "It's done." Clara replied in under a minute. "Trust is locked, assets are safe, he won't get a cent." I turned off my phone. For the first time in many nights, I slept peacefully. Because I knew that by morning, Zach would make his final move. And he had no idea I'd already made mine. 1 week after I sent that email to Clara, the door to my condo echoed with 3 sharp knocks. No one had called ahead. No one said they were coming. A wave of unease hit my chest as I looked through the peephole and saw a man in a navy suit holding a thick envelope. "Miss Nova Keller." His voice was calm. I nodded. "You've been served. These are documents from the Cook County Court." I took them, my fingers squeezing the edge of the envelope so tightly I could see the whites of my nails. The door closed. The apartment fell silent. I stood there for a moment before walking to the kitchen table and slowly opening the file. Zach had made his move. The first line was crystal clear. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Plaintiff, Zachary Cole. Defendant, Nova Keller. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding out of my chest, when I landed on the section titled, Asset Requests. Equal division of all marital assets. Full ownership of the West Adams condo. Rights to use the Tesla Model Y. 50% stake in the joint investment account. Monthly financial support due to unequal income. I laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh. He wanted it all. After betraying me, he thought he could draw himself a brand new, comfortable future, using my money. I didn't wait. I picked up the phone and called Clara. Zach just filed. I know, Clara said calmly. The court notified us of the preliminary hearing schedule this morning. He's asking for everything, even the condo and the car. Clara chuckled, this time with a hint of amusement. Let him ask, he has no idea we're already several steps ahead. 3 days later, I was sitting in Clara's office, sunlight from the large window casting a diagonal glow across the thick stack of documents on the table. Clara flipped through each page, explaining every section like she was narrating a fireworks show, and I was the VIP audience. All your personal assets have been transferred to the Legatus Holdings Trust prior to the divorce petition being filed, Clara said. Legal. Protected. Untouchable. I nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the bold printed line. Assets classified as individually held, not marital. Can he sue? He can try, but he'll lose. I exhaled. Not from worry this time, but because, for the first time since this all began, I knew I'd won the opening move. The preliminary hearing took place in courtroom 12B of the Chicago Civil Court. Zach showed up in an expensive gray suit, tie neatly knotted, eyes scanning past me without a flicker of emotion. He looked like a man confident of victory, if you didn't notice the slight tremor in his hand as his attorney handed him the file. Clara sat beside me, posture straight, gaze sharp as steel. When the judge asked about asset division, Zach's lawyer stood and confidently delivered a speech about legal entitlement to marital property, emphasizing the emotional support and contributions to his wife's career throughout the marriage. I said nothing, let him perform. Then Clara rose, her voice rang clear, unwavering. All assets currently held by the defendant were legally transferred into a private trust prior to the divorce filing. We have documentation, transfer receipts, and confirmation from the bank, dated before the 17th of last month. The plaintiff has no legal claim to these assets. The air in the courtroom thickened. Zach leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer. They both bowed their heads, conferred briefly, and then his attorney requested a pause to verify the information. I said nothing. I just looked at Zach. His eyes were no longer cold, they were panicked. He knew. He was too late. That night I returned home, poured myself a glass of red wine and stood by the window, staring out at the city. Rain had started falling, droplets tapping softly against the glass. The apartment was silent. No familiar cologne, no stealthy footsteps in the night. I called Clara back and said just one sentence. Zach knows he's lost everything. She laughed. I bet he'll make his next move by tomorrow morning. Men like him don't give up that easily. I nodded and ended the call. I knew Clara was right. Zach wouldn't go down without a fight. But now? I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the one setting the trap. I should have known the first victory wouldn't make Zach back off. Men like him don't know how to accept defeat. They only know how to turn humiliation into ammunition. And sure enough, less than 3 days after the preliminary hearing, I felt the first wave of his next attack. It didn't come as a subpoena or an email from his lawyer, it came through looks. At the office, co-workers glanced sideways when I walked into the conference room. A few whispered behind my back in the hallway, conversations abruptly stopping when I passed by. I called Rachel, my assistant, standing at her desk, looking uncertain. Phone in hand, as if she'd just read something she couldn't believe. What's going on? I asked, my voice low and sharp. Rachel flinched. I wasn't sure if I should tell you. I crossed my arms, my gaze cold as steel. Tell me. She swallowed hard, then held out her phone. On the screen was a screenshot of a message. Heard Nova Keller is using a fake name to launder money through a trust, dodging nearly $100,000 in taxes. Don't tell anyone I said this. Her husband's former lawyer is the source. A wave of fury surged through my chest. I clenched my fists, blood pulsing in every fingertip. Who's spreading this? Rachel shook her head. Not sure, but people are saying Zach's been opening up to a few mutual acquaintances. Sounds like he's spinning the story. Saying you embezzled marital funds and used a shell entity to hide assets. He really was a snake, slick, poisonous and pathetic. I didn't say another word. I simply nodded, turned around, went back to my office, shut the door, and started taking action. That afternoon I spent 3 hours printing everything I could find. Screenshots of messages, comments from social media groups, leaked emails from anonymous addresses. Every line of slander was a dagger, aimed at the reputation I had spent over a decade building. I sent everything to Clara. Less than 30 minutes later she called back, her voice no longer cool and composed. It was blunt, sharp like a steel blade. We're threatening a defamation lawsuit, immediately. I want him to know I'm not afraid, I said. And I won't stay silent anymore. I'm sending legal cease and desist letters to him and his attorney. If he opens his mouth one more time, we take this to court. I nodded and hung up. But I knew threats alone wouldn't be enough. Zach didn't understand boundaries. He'd only stop when dragged into the light and stripped of everything. 2 days later I saw him. I walked into LaRue, the go-to restaurant for the legal crowd in the city, where I often held private meetings, and there he was, sitting at the bar. He wasn't alone. 2 men I recognized as partners from a prominent county law firm sat beside him. The 3 of them were laughing and clinking glasses like they were celebrating a win. I didn't hesitate. I didn't speak up. I didn't create a scene. I walked straight to the table, leaned in close, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. Watch your mouth, Zach, it's digging your grave. His face froze for half a second, then quickly shifted back into that fake calm expression. Nova, you're overreacting. I smiled. Colder than January? I've sent a formal warning. All evidence has been archived. One more step and we're in court. I won't warn you again. I didn't wait for his response. I turned and walked away like he was a stain I'd just wiped off my shirt. The next morning, I got word from Clara. Zach had gone quiet, at least for now, but I knew he was shifting gears. A man like Zach doesn't back down, he just waits to strike from another angle. I looked at my reflection in the office bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me had eyes of stone, a clenched jaw, and no trace of the trusting wife she once was. I whispered to myself. The game just changed. And this time, I'm the one writing the rules. I was pouring my morning coffee when my phone rang. Clara's name lit up on the screen. She never called before 8, unless it was something truly urgent. I picked up. Nova, we have a problem. Her voice was firm, no greeting, no preamble. My hand froze, the sound of coffee dripping onto the countertop suddenly ticking like a countdown. What is it? Zach and Ilya just filed a new motion with the court. They're accusing you of financial fraud. There are signatures, bank statements, internal transfers, all pointing to you allegedly hiding assets in offshore accounts, with signs of money laundering. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My hand clenched the ceramic mug so tightly, my fingertips went numb. He forged it? We're not certain yet, but... Clara paused. I've sent everything to Beatrice for analysis. She's going through every line. I'll update you as soon as I can. Nova. I'm fine, I cut her off, even though my heart was pounding like thunder in my chest. But I wasn't fine. Because this time, if we couldn't find a flaw in their forged documents, I wouldn't just lose my reputation. I could face criminal charges. That afternoon, I went to Clara's office. The room was filled with documents, spreadsheets and folders stamped urgent. Beatrice, our legal analyst and financial auditor, sat at a side desk, steel-framed glasses on, her fingers flying over the keyboard like a machine. What do we have? I asked bluntly. Beatrice looked up, eyes sharp as laser beams. I found the fatal flaw in their evidence. Clara stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes full of anticipation. Beatrice continued. Zach and Ilya submitted evidence showing you transferred money to 2 Cayman accounts last March. Both accounts were listed under your name, complete with account numbers and exact transfer dates. I nodded, gritting my teeth. What's the issue? Beatrice rotated her screen toward me, pointing at a single line of text. Those accounts didn't exist at the time they claimed. I squinted at the screen. The bank had confirmed that the account numbers were created 3 months after the date listed in Zach's records. Davidson Mark? They're that sloppy? No, they're desperate, Clara answered for her. Also, Beatrice added, I checked the digital timestamps on all the documents they submitted. Every file has metadata tampering. The PDF editing software was detected immediately. I let out a laugh. It was a relieved sound, but there was nothing joyful in it. They submitted fake documents to the court? Clara nodded firmly. This isn't just misconduct, it's a criminal offense, submitting falsified documents to obstruct legal proceedings. I exhaled, like someone had just disarmed a ticking bomb in my chest. I pictured Zach's face when he realized his final blow didn't just fail, it dragged him straight into legal jeopardy. What do we do now? Clara smirked. Now we strike back. 3 days later, Clara and I appeared before the judge with the full document analysis. Beatrice was with us, standing tall like someone ready to unravel an entire conspiracy. Before Zach's lawyer could even speak, Clara submitted a thick file stamped in bold red. Evidence. Fraudulent documents submitted by plaintiff. Beatrice stood and detailed every point. The non-existent accounts, the falsified dates, the manipulated metadata. Each statement landed like a blade, shredding the plaintiff's entire defense. When she finished, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. Then the judge turned to Zach, voice low and firm. The court is reviewing the accusation of submitting forged documents. If verified, the plaintiff will face serious legal consequences. Zach's lawyer shot to his feet, whispering frantically in his ear. I saw Zach's face drain of color, his lips pressed so tightly they bled. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me. Every second. Every breath. I wanted him to know he had lost. And this time, there was no way out. That afternoon I sat alone on my balcony, the wind biting cold. Below me, the city of Chicago lit up as night fell. Beatrice's words still echoed in my ears. They forged everything so poorly, we can file a countersuit. I lifted my wineglass and took a sip. This was no longer just about protecting myself. It was time to bring his entire game crashing down. I didn't blink as I signed the counterclaim. My hand was steady, my back straight, each letter sharp and deliberate like the final cut of a blade. Zach Cole and Ilya Morrow would pay not just for fabricating lies, but for believing I would stay quiet. Clara pulled the file back toward her, eyes blazing. We're not just suing for defamation, we're charging them with submitting fraudulent evidence in a civil proceeding. If the court agrees, the penalty won't stop at money. I want everything, I said. Attorney's fees, damage to my reputation, lost time, every bit of it. And you'll get it, Clara replied firmly. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Get ready, Nova. We're not playing defense anymore. It's time to strike back. Cook County Courthouse, Courtroom 4, C. I walked in wearing a fitted black suit, my hair pulled into a tight bun, face bare but eyes sharp as blades. Zach was already there, seated at the opposite table with Ilya and his new attorney. A silver-haired man clearly hired in hopes of turning the tide. But hope is a luxury, and Zach owed himself a deserving end. Clara was the first to stand when the judge asked for opening statements. Your Honor, my client, Nova Keller, files a counterclaim against Mr. Zachary Cole and Miss Ilya Morrow on 3 clear grounds. 1. Defamation through intentional dissemination of false information. 2. Submission of forged evidence to the court. And 3. Willful legal fraud aimed at manipulating divorce proceedings. The judge raised an eyebrow, then nodded. Proceed. Clara laid out crisp, high-resolution prints of Zach's falsified documents, alongside Beatrice's expert testimony on the tampered metadata, non-existent accounts, mismatched timestamps, and clear signs of software interference. When the recording of Beatrice's explanation played across the courtroom, I locked eyes with Zach. There was no smirk now, no smug glint. His face had gone pale, his gaze unsteady. Then Clara placed a new file on the bench. Evidence of the smear campaign against me. Leaked messages, anonymous emails, all traced back to an IP address from Ilya Maro's apartment. Miss Ilya Maro not only conspired to forge evidence, but she is also the primary actor behind the release of damaging rumors that severely harmed my client's professional and personal reputation. Zach's attorney rose with a weak objection, claiming the motive was speculative. Clara simply shrugged and tapped the screen in front of her. This is a recovered message from Ilya to Zach, retrieved from a phone under police-authorized access. The message appeared on screen. If she gets hit with money laundering, we can push for a new settlement. The room went still. When the hearing paused for the court to deliberate, I turned to Clara. You think he'll withdraw? Did you see his face? She said. Zach never imagined he wouldn't just lose but be publicly crushed. And he was. When we reconvened, Zach's attorney stood, voice shaking despite his effort to appear composed. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw all original claims and will no longer pursue action against the defendant, Nova Keller. I showed no expression, but inside it felt like thunder rolling over a scorched desert. Not joy. Just release. The judge nodded and declared. The court acknowledges the plaintiff's withdrawal. Due to the severity of misconduct, Mr. Zachary Cole is ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant, including those related to the counterclaim. Furthermore, this case will be referred to the Civil Legal Fraud Review Board for further investigation. The sound of the gavel echoed, like the final blow sealing off a dirty war. Zach lowered his head. Ilya wouldn't even look up. I rose and walked out of the courtroom, my shadow trailing behind me. That I didn't look back. On the ride home, Clara turned to me and smiled. For the first time in weeks of tension. You did it, Nova. I leaned back in my seat, gazing out the window as the city rushed by like fragments of memory. I survived, now it's time to start over. 2 weeks after the final hearing, I got a call from Clara at 9 a.m. while I was watering plants on the balcony. Her voice came through clearly, no small talk. Zach signed. The divorce settlement is officially in effect, starting today. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. The watering can was still in my hand, water still falling over the lavender pots. But my heart felt like it had stopped. After everything, I was finally free. Clara continued. He gets nothing, Nova, no assets, no alimony, not a single cent. The court denied all financial claims, and the record of his fraudulent conduct has been forwarded to the district attorney's office. I closed my eyes, tilted my head back, and took a deep breath. Freedom. I used to think it was some distant concept, something you only found after all the pain was gone. But it was here, now. When I was no longer bound to a toxic marriage, a two-faced man, or the fear of losing everything. I only lost what needed to be lost, and I kept the most valuable thing of all. Myself. That afternoon, I went to Clara's office to sign the final papers. The room still smelled like freshly polished oak, but the atmosphere was lighter than ever before. No more tension. No opposing counsel. Just peace. Clara placed the folder on the table. This is the court-approved copy of the settlement. You just need to sign here. I picked up the pen without hesitation. Every stroke of ink felt like closing one chapter and opening a blank, unwritten page. As I set the pen down, Clara looked at me with quiet respect. You did what most people wouldn't dare. You didn't just win, Nova, you survived. And stood tall. I smiled. For the first time in what felt like months. A real smile. Because I had no other choice, I couldn't live halfway anymore. That evening, I invited Margot, my foster mom from college, and Beatrice over to my place. Clara came too, carrying a bottle of red wine from Napa Valley. "No talk of Zach tonight," I declared as I raised my glass. "Tonight is about us. About freedom. About living true to ourselves." We toasted, the wine catching warm golden light as it shimmered in our glasses. I looked around the kitchen. Once a silent battleground between me and him, now filled only with laughter, the clink of glasses and the soft hum of plates on porcelain. I didn't need anyone to tell me I did the right thing. I could feel it in every breath I took. The following week, I left Chicago for 3 days, driving alone to Michigan. I rented a small cabin by Lake Traverse. No internet, no phone, just books, a set of paintbrushes, and a few cozy sweaters. I spent most of the day sitting on the porch, watching the stillness of the lake, rewriting my life story. Not as memories, but as choices. For the first time since everything, I asked myself, what do I want, not for anyone else, but for me? I wanted to wake up without fearing who was lying behind my back. I wanted to eat breakfast without watching someone's phone face down on the table. I wanted to love again, someday, when I was ready, but not to fill a void. Because I was already whole inside. I wrote those things in a plain leather notebook. No decorations, no embellishments. Just my words. And my truth. When I returned to Chicago, I knew what came next. I submitted my resignation at the old law firm. I no longer wanted to stay where whispers had once cut into me, fueled by Zach's lies. I didn't need to prove anything there anymore. Instead, I opened a small legal practice specializing in helping women escape toxic marriages. Clara helped me file the business paperwork. Beatrice joined as our financial advisor. I named it Phoenix Legal Group because I knew I had once burned to ashes and risen again. On an October afternoon, as the wind began to turn cold, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights begin to glow. A cup of ginger tea in my hand, a blanket draped lightly over my shoulders, and my favorite jazz playing softly from the speaker inside. My phone vibrated. A no number. I looked at the screen. No message, just a silent call. I hit block. No hesitation. No regret. I stood up, walked inside, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. I began to write again. Not a deposition. Not a defense. But a new story. One I chose. And no one could take it from me anymore. Nova's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the ones closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most. But instead of breaking, Nova chose to rise, to take action, and reclaim control over her life. In the real world, betrayal can leave us paralyzed. But it also reveals who truly deserves a place in our lives. Strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about how we rise above it. Remember, you have the right to protect yourself, and you deserve a life free from manipulation. What do you think about Nova's journey? If it were you, what would you have done differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful true stories and meaningful lessons about family and life. I will never forget the day my mother pulled me out of the living room, quietly closing the door while the sound of clapping and cheering still echoed from the other side. I was only 9 years old, and that was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be shut out of a world I was supposed to belong to. I stood in the dark hallway, listening to my sister Bella, singing like an angel amid the joyful laughter of our relatives. The house seemed to light up every time she appeared. And me. I was just a faded background behind the spotlight. Maybe I got used to it too early. But what I can't forget isn't the indifference. It's the moment I realized my family never really saw me. My name is Rose, and I grew up in the enormous shadow of my sister. A sparkling perfect shadow painted in violins, princess dresses, and endless childhood photo shoots. Bella is 2 years older than me, the precious gem in my parents' eyes. The one who made them proud in front of neighbors, friends, and even strangers. She wasn't just beautiful, she could sing, dance, and got into the school's cheerleading team in 5th grade. Everything she touched seemed magical, while I was just Rose, the quiet kid, always buried in a book. I didn't hate Bella, really. She never deliberately tried to hurt me, but I hated how my whole family turned her into the only sun allowed to shine, while I quietly orbited around her like a lonely planet. Her birthdays were always big events, mini fireworks in the yard, 3-tiered cakes and a guest list so long we had to borrow chairs from the neighbors. My birthday, a store-bought cake and a half-hearted greeting, often rescheduled because it clashed with Bella's dance class. My parents invested everything in her. Singing lessons, dance, piano, then art. I once asked to take a drawing class because I liked quietly creating my own world with pencils. But my mom dismissed it immediately. "You don't have the talent, Rose. Drawing is a waste of money." I just lowered my head and said nothing. Not because I agreed, but because I knew arguing wouldn't help. I had an old watercolor set my aunt gave me, and I used to secretly paint at night, in the closet, with a flashlight wedged between my knees. Even the clothes I wore were Bella's hand-me-downs, dresses with patterns that didn't suit my personality, sometimes with ink stains or frayed hems. I never got to pick out new clothes for myself. My parents said saving is good, yet they'd gladly drop nearly $500 on a new performance dress for Bella for every singing competition. I learned to stay quiet. Learned to disappear in that house, just to avoid feeling like a burden no one wanted to keep around. But I had a place to escape to, a little attic behind the house, dusty and filled with old books my grandfather left behind. There, I could sit for hours, reading one book after another, losing myself in ancient Egypt, distant planets, or wild jungle adventures. No one came looking for me there. They were too busy with Bella and her rehearsals. I loved the feeling of being alone, not judged, not compared. The only person who truly saw me was Aunt Agnes, my grandmother's younger sister, who lived about 30 minutes away by car. Whenever she visited, she always asked me what I was reading, what I was thinking. Never, "Are you planning to join a team like Bella?" She looked at me with honest eyes, no pretense, and I felt, for the first time, truly seen as a person, not just Bella's little sister. One time, she quietly slipped a leather-bound notebook into my pocket and whispered, "Write down your world, Rose. One day, it'll be the most precious thing you have." I kept that notebook like a treasure, hid it under my pillow, and filled it with stories no one else had ever heard. Aunt Agnes was the reason I didn't completely give up. She never tried to change me, never pushed me to shine. She was simply there, and, to me, that was more than enough. But outside of her, my whole world was still shadows. Parties I wasn't part of, and dinners where my name was only called if they needed more sauce. That's how I lived, quietly, invisibly, and desperately trying to believe my worth didn't lie in applause or medals. But you know, when a child is forgotten for too long, it doesn't just hurt. It starts to believe it truly isn't worth remembering. I had never felt so brave, and never so stupid. That night, dinner went on as usual, meaning it was all about Bella. She had just won some kind of award at her school's art competition, and my mom kept retelling it with a face glowing with pride. My dad poured wine for everyone, except me of course, and said smugly, "My daughter's heading to UCLA, we definitely need a big celebration." I clenched my fork, my palm was freezing but my chest burned like fire. I swallowed hard and spoke up, not knowing where I found the courage. "I want to go to college too. I'm planning to apply to the business program in state." Every sound around the table suddenly disappeared. Bella stopped smiling, my mom frowned, and my dad laughed. A loud, dry, mocking laugh. "Rose, what did you just say?" My mom blinked, as if she hadn't heard me right. "I want to go to college. I want to study business administration," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Then the table exploded in laughter. Not the fun kind. The kind that stings. Like I had just said I was going to Mars. "Oh, honey," my mom wiped away tears from laughing, "you know college isn't for everyone, right?" Dad nodded, still in that cruel, amused tone. "You're not like Bella, Rose. She has talent. You..." You should be more realistic. Working at Uncle Travis's diner would be just fine. My throat went dry. I sat still, trying not to cry right there at the table. Bella looked away. She didn't laugh, but she didn't say a word to defend me either. I stood up, pushed my chair back and ran upstairs, heart pounding and ears ringing. Every step on the stairs felt like a hammer hitting the fragile shell of my self-worth. I didn't sleep that night. I sat staring at my report card. Straight A's. Certificates, recommendation letters from teachers. I studied day and night, spent hours in the library, walked long distances just to ask more questions and understand better, and all I got in return was a smirk? The next morning, before anyone could leave the breakfast table, I walked straight into the living room, holding a thick stack of documents. I threw it down on the table. "If you think I'm not good enough, then read this," I said, my voice shaking with anger and pain. My mom picked it up and flipped through a few pages. My dad clicked his tongue, arms crossed like he was looking at a laundry flyer. "So what?" he said eventually. "Even if your grades are good, it doesn't change the fact that this family has no money left for you." "It all went to Bella," my mom added. "She needs to study art. She needs fame. And you should learn how to earn a living realistically." I was stunned. Not because of the words, but because of how calmly they said them, like my future was just a footnote beneath the grand photo titled Bella. "So, I don't get any chance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dad shrugged. "We've made our decision, Rose. Don't make a scene." I turned and walked out of the room with heavy steps. But something in my mind had just snapped. And from that crack, a new determination began to form. If they couldn't see my worth, I would make them see it, even just once. I sat motionless in the corner of the backyard, clutching the wrinkled report card I had slammed on the table that morning. A numb feeling spread through me, like I wasn't a person anymore, just some leftover item everyone wanted to throw away. I didn't know how long I sat there. The weather started to turn cold, and the wind blew through my tangled hair like a reminder that it was time to get up. But I didn't want to go back inside, where every door had already been closed to me. My phone rang. Aunt Maggie was calling. I almost burst into tears just hearing her voice on the other end. "Are you okay, Rose?" Her voice was gentle, like a blanket wrapped around my frozen heart. I couldn't pretend. I started talking, breaking down in tears. I told her about the humiliating dinner, how they dismissed my dreams like I was asking for something ridiculous. I left nothing out. Not even the moment Bella looked away when I needed her the most. She listened silently, only sighing softly now and then. Finally, she said something that changed my life. "Rose, I have some savings. I want you to use it to go to college." I was stunned. You mean it?" I blurted out, my heart racing. "I've never been more serious," she said firmly. "You're smart, hardworking, and you deserve a chance. I won't let your talent be buried just because of someone else's selfishness." I broke down like a child. But those were tears of hope. For the first time in years. The next day I quietly packed my things. No one asked what I was doing. My mom was busy scheduling Bella's graduation photos. My dad was watching sports. When I walked down the stairs with my suitcase, they barely glanced at me before turning away like I was just a puff of smoke. "I'm going to live with Aunt Maggie," I said, standing tall in the living room. "She's going to help me go to college." My mom raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Maggie? She doesn't have money." "That's no longer your concern," I replied, then turned and walked out the door. No one stopped me, not a single goodbye, not a single hug. Aunt Maggie lived in a small house in the suburbs, with a porch covered in bougainvillea and an old rocking chair I used to love as a kid. As soon as I stepped inside, I smelled the sweet scent of apple pie. The only smell in the world that ever made me feel safe. She hugged me tightly, like she was trying to mend every broken piece of my heart. "From now on, this is your home," she whispered. That summer, she and I worked together on my college applications. She drove me to every counseling session, helped me write scholarship essays, corrected every punctuation mark in my personal statement. Every afternoon we sat on the porch with glasses of lemonade, talking about what I would do once I became a business student. "I'm going to run a big restaurant," I said, beaming. "Or open a little cafe with books and jazz music." She smiled, eyes sparkling with pride. "Whatever it is, you're going to succeed, I'm sure of it." The good news came on an early morning in August. I got an email saying I'd been accepted into the business program at Washington State University. I screamed, jumping out of my chair like I'd been shocked. Aunt Maggie hugged me, both of us crying tears of joy that words couldn't describe. That evening, we celebrated with barbecue sandwiches and apple juice, simple yet richer than any party I ever had in my old house. I started packing for the first big trip of my life. Not to run away, but to begin living. Aunt Maggie helped me fold each shirt, pack each book, and even tucked in a jar of blueberry jam she made just for me. The next morning, I stepped off the university bus with a pounding heart. The huge campus, tall buildings, and endless signs overwhelmed me, but I wasn't afraid. I had gotten here on my own effort, and with the love of the one person who had ever truly believed in me. I stood in the middle of the campus and took a deep breath. The wind swept through my hair, carrying away the bitterness of the past and the fresh hope just beginning to bloom. "Rose, you've finally begun." Now I'm sitting in the final class of my final semester, sunlight pouring onto the lecture desk, my heart glowing like the quiet fire that had burned inside me for 4 years finally caught flame. I had made it to the end of a road no one believed I could walk. Except Aunt Maggie. Throughout college, I never let myself slack off for a single day. When you know your own family buried your dreams right in front of you, you'll never allow yourself to fail. I studied day and night, worked part-time at the library, joined the student management club, and always looked for ways to lead every group project. I didn't want to just get through. I wanted to rise above. And what about Bella? During my sophomore year, I heard she dropped out. Not because of bad grades, not because she lost motivation, but because she got pregnant by a rich boyfriend, only to find out he wasn't the only one she was involved with. The news hit me like an icy gust, not because I was happy or sad, but because it made me realize the throne my family built for her was more fragile than I thought. According to Aunt Maggie, Bella came home 5 months pregnant, with a distant, almost arrogant attitude. "He's going to marry me," she told my mom, "because it's a family tradition." But a few weeks later, everything fell apart. He found out she'd been seeing his best friend. The relationship ended in a furious fight, and there was no wedding. My parents panicked. Bella acted like nothing happened. But what made me laugh, with a touch of bitterness, was where she ended up working after having the baby. Uncle Travis's restaurant. The same place they once told me I should go if I didn't get into college. I graduated with honors. Standing on stage, diploma in hand, I looked out at the audience and saw Aunt Maggie waving, tears streaming down her cheeks. My parents weren't there, Bella wasn't there. But I didn't feel empty. In that moment, Aunt Maggie was my whole world. After the ceremony, I got a job offer from an upscale restaurant chain called the Gilded Fork, known for its fusion cuisine and Michelin-level service. I started as an assistant manager at their downtown Portland location, where the lights never go out and customers happily drop $100 on lunch. I didn't take shortcuts. I worked 12-hour days, trained staff, handled crises, learned to negotiate with vendors like a warrior. And after 2 years, when the former manager moved to another project, I was promoted to general manager. 26 years old, running $1 million restaurant. All on my own. The first thing I did after getting my first paycheck with that incredible salary, I went straight to the electronics store. I picked out the latest smartphone, big screen, high-resolution camera, massive storage, the salesperson asked. "A gift for your boyfriend?" I smiled. "No, for someone way more important, my aunt." Aunt Maggie nearly screamed when I handed her the phone that Sunday afternoon. "Oh my goodness, Rose, this is way too fancy. Not more than what you've done for me," I said, my eyes burning. "Now, I'm going to teach you how to use Facebook, TikTok, and even video calls." We spent the whole afternoon setting up accounts, taking photos, tweaking filters. Her favorite thing was filming videos of her apple pie, which later turned into a little series that gained over 1,000 followers in just a few weeks. Every time work got stressful, I'd open one of her clips, talking about making the crust crisp, and all the pressure would melt away. "You're a social media star now," I teased, when one of her videos hit over 50,000 views. She laughed, eyes shining like they used to when I was a little girl, hiding in her arms to find a safe place in the world. One late afternoon, while I was busy preparing the VIP reservation list, my phone lit up with a name both unfamiliar and familiar. Mom. I froze. My hand holding the phone began to tremble. It had been nearly 3 years since I last heard her voice, and now she was calling. I didn't know why, but a sick feeling crept into my chest. I didn't answer, not yet. But I knew this story wasn't over, and when it came back, I had to be ready. I thought I was strong enough not to need any apologies. But then, on a damp Saturday afternoon, as I was organizing a new menu for a VIP event at the restaurant, my phone rang, with a name I had buried deep in my memory. Mom. I was going to decline the call, but somehow, my finger slid over the answer button. "Rose, can you hear me?" Her voice was raspy, both distant and familiar. "I can," I replied, cold as the wall of ice I had built around myself. There was a pause, then she spoke as if swallowing every word. "Your father and we want to see you, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. My heart felt like it had been dipped in ice water, pounding so hard my chest ached. "Okay. Sunday." I hung up before she could say anything else. I stood in front of the old house at exactly 10 a.m. It looked smaller than I remembered, and much more worn. The paint was peeling, the roof sagged like the back of an old man. The door swung open before I could even ring the bell. My mother hugged me as if we had never fallen apart. "You're so thin," she said. I didn't reply. Dad stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, eyes cautious like he was calculating something. Bella was sitting on the sofa, holding a toddler, likely my niece. I nodded politely, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. After a few awkward pleasantries, my mom finally revealed the real reason. "Rose, I know we were wrong before, your father too, but Lily, she's trying to change, she needs a chance. Can you help her get a job at the restaurant?" I said nothing. I didn't know why, but I felt pity. Not for Bella, but for myself. Because even after everything, a part of me still wanted them to see my worth. I nodded. "I'll ask the HR manager." Truth is, I was the HR manager. But I didn't want them to know too much. Lily started working at the Gilded Fork the following week, as an administrative staff member. I braced myself for everything: lateness, laziness, bad attitude. But to my surprise, she showed up on time every day, worked hard, and got along with everyone. Customers even liked her. At first I thought it was just a front. But after weeks passed, I couldn't deny it. Bella was trying. Maybe it was for her child, or maybe fear of failure, I wasn't sure. But what I did know was for the first time in her life, she wasn't living in the spotlight. She was learning to face reality. As for me, after a year of managing the main restaurant, I was called into a meeting with the general director. "Rose, we want you to lead the launch of 3 new branches in Seattle, Boise, and Sacramento. You'll be the regional director." I was stunned. Then I nodded, nearly speechless. "I won't let you down." When I moved to Seattle to run the new branch, my life bloomed. With a salary twice as high as before, I rented a cozy little apartment downtown, with big windows overlooking the harbor, sunlight flooding in every morning. And then, the calls started. First my mom. "The roof is leaking. Can you help me fix it?" I sent the money, no hesitation. Then it was the broken water heater. It's freezing in the winter, Rose, and your niece is still small. I sent more money. Then came the new sofa, then the fridge that leaks constantly, and even, we want to repaint the front so the neighbors won't look down on us. Every time I said okay, with a part of me still silently hoping for one thing. Thank you, Rose. We're proud of you. But that sentence never came. Only more requests, again and again, like I was a smiling eight. Still, I kept sending the money, not because I was weak, but because I had spent my entire childhood chasing one approving glance from my parents, and now, I wasn't sure if I was trying to buy it with every wire transfer. One late afternoon, while I was busy finalizing the VIP reservation list, my phone lit up with a name that felt strange yet familiar. Mom. I froze. My hand holding the phone started to tremble. It had been nearly 3 years since I last heard her voice, and now she was calling. I didn't know why, but a sick feeling crawled into my chest. I didn't pick up. Not yet. But I knew. This story wasn't over. And when it returned, I had to be ready. I thought I was strong enough not to need any apologies. But then, on a damp Saturday afternoon, while arranging a new menu for a VIP event at the restaurant, my phone rang with a name I had buried deep in my memory. Mom. I was about to decline, but somehow my finger slid over to the answer button. Rose, can you hear me? Her voice was raspy, both unfamiliar and familiar. I can, I replied, cold as the wall I had built around myself. There was a pause, then she spoke, as if forcing each word out. Your father and I, we want to see you, can we talk? I didn't respond right away. My heart felt like it had been plunged into ice water, pounding so hard, my chest hurt. Okay, Sunday. I hung up before she could say anything more. I stood in front of the old house at exactly 10 a.m. It looked smaller than I remembered, and much older. The paint was peeling, the roof sagged like an old man's back. The door opened before I even reached for the bell. My mother hugged me like we had never fallen apart. You've gotten so thin, she said. I didn't respond. Dad stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, his gaze cautious, like he was measuring something. Bella was sitting on the couch, holding a toddler, probably my niece. I nodded in greeting, trying to suppress the lump rising in my throat. After a few awkward pleasantries, my mom revealed the real reason. Rose, I know we were wrong before, your father too. But Lily? She's trying to change. She needs a chance. Can you help her get a job at the restaurant? I stayed silent. I didn't know why, but I felt pity. Not for Bella, but for myself. Because even after everything, some part of me still wanted them to recognize my worth. I nodded. I'll talk to HR. In reality, I was the HR manager. But I didn't want them to know too much. Lily started working at the Gilded Fork the following week, in an administrative role. I braced myself for the worst. Lateness, laziness, a bad attitude. But to my surprise, she arrived on time every day, worked hard, and got along with everyone. Customers even liked her. At first, I thought it was just a front. But over the weeks, I couldn't deny it. Bella was trying. Maybe it was for her child, or maybe fear of failing again. I didn't know. But what I did know was, for the first time in her life, she wasn't basking in the spotlight. She was facing reality with her head down. As for me, after a year managing the main restaurant, I was called into a meeting with the general director. Rose, we want you to lead the launch of 3 new branches in Seattle, Boise, and Sacramento. You'll be regional director. I was stunned, then nodded. Nearly speechless. I won't let you down. When I moved to Seattle to run the new branch, my life began to bloom. With a salary twice as high as before, I rented a small, lovely apartment in the city center, with big windows overlooking the harbor, sunlight pouring in every morning. And then the calls began. First my mom. "The roof is leaking, can you help fix it?" I sent the money, no hesitation. Then the water heater broke. "It's cold in the winter, Rose, and your niece is still little." I sent more money. Then it was a new sofa, then the fridge, that leaks constantly, and even, "We want to repaint the front so the neighbors won't laugh." Every time I said, "Okay," with a part of me still quietly hoping for one thing. "Thank you, Rose, we're proud of you." But those words never came. Only more requests. Again and again. Like I was a smiling 18. Still, I kept sending the money. Not because I was weak, but because I had spent my entire childhood chasing one look of approval from my parents. And now, I wasn't sure if I was trying to buy that look with every transfer. Bella and I kept a strictly professional relationship, not close but not hostile. "One time," she said. "Thank you for giving me a chance." I just nodded. "Don't thank me, you did your part." I didn't want to attach more emotions to this, but deep down I knew. If they ever betrayed me again, I wouldn't have the strength to recover. And I was right. That afternoon I was in my new office on the 15th floor, reviewing the candidate list for the Sacramento branch manager position. The coffee on my desk had gone cold, my mind drifting between resumes, when a Facebook notification popped up on my phone. Aunt Maggie just posted a new video. I smiled. Her videos were my stress relief after a long day. I regularly watched her tutorials on planting tomatoes, baking apple pie, or telling funny stories about the neighbors' cats. I opened the video, expecting to see her garden or hear her warm laughter, but instead, I saw a chaotic party scene. The sound was loud and sharp, the effects of alcohol clear in the laughter, and the way adults spoke without control. The camera was shaky, probably because Aunt Maggie had left her phone on the table without turning it off. I saw my mother clearly, with her old-fashioned curls, holding a glass of red wine, speaking loudly in front of familiar relatives. "That girl, Rose," she burst out laughing. "She thinks she's all that, but in reality she's just a parasite, useless. It's all thanks to Lily." I froze. My dad stood next to her, face flushed, clapping in agreement. "Exactly. Without Lily, Gilded Fork would have collapsed. Rose is just a name, that title is just for show." I heard people laughing loudly. One of them, probably Aunt Ellie, nodded along. "She's only successful because of luck, nothing to admire." In a corner I saw Lily. She was holding her child, not laughing. But she didn't speak up either. Not a word of defense. She stayed silent, as if everything they said was true. It felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water into my heart. Every second of that video was a clean, sharp, merciless cut. After everything I had sacrificed, the money, the trust, the effort to rebuild a family, this was how they saw me? I turned the video off when my throat felt too tight to breathe. Hands shaking, I called Aunt Maggie immediately. She answered after 3 rings. "Rose." Her voice was full of guilt. "Auntie." My voice was hoarse, ready to break. "I just watched the video. Did you post it on purpose?" She sighed. "I didn't realize the phone was still recording, but when I saw it, I didn't take it down. I thought, it was time you saw who you're really dealing with." "They called me a parasite, did you know that?" "I did." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. How much money have I sent them? How many times have I stepped in when they needed something? Why? Why me? "Because you're the only one in this family who doesn't need to prove your worth, and yet you're the one they demand the most from," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Because you're kind, and they take advantage of that." I sat in silence, tears falling onto my hands. "Are you disappointed in me?" I whispered. "No. But I'm disappointed that they don't deserve you." We didn't speak for several minutes. I just listened to the soft wind outside my window and her steady breathing on the other end of the line. But in that moment, I knew there was no going back. I hung up, stood, and walked out of the office straight to the parking lot. No coat, no hesitation. My chest felt like it was being ripped open, with anger, shame, and a kind of pain I couldn't name. The pain of someone who had trusted. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, watching a text from my mother pop up. "Rose, take down the video. You shouldn't let outsiders see our family matters." I didn't reply. I opened my banking app and canceled every scheduled transfer. No more roof repairs, no more broken heaters, no more anything. I took a sheet of paper and wrote each word by hand, clear, firm, the way I needed it etched into my mind. I am not a parasite. On Monday morning, after the video, I walked into the restaurant with tired eyes but a clearer mind than ever. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and did one thing: canceled all recurring payments to my parents. No message, no explanation. There was nothing left to say. My phone started buzzing non-stop around midday. Messages from my mom came in, each one like an old knife being freshly sharpened. "Sweetheart, that night was just a misunderstanding. Everyone had too much to drink. Don't overthink it." I turned off notifications, but less than an hour later, another wave of texts rolled in. "Rose, we didn't get this month's transfer. It's getting cold, the heater's broken, what are you going to do? We're family. Are you really going to abandon your parents?" I didn't respond. As my silence stretched into 3 days, the tone started to shift. "Stop being selfish. We raised you, and this is how you repay us? Don't forget who brought you into this world. Without us, you wouldn't have gotten an education or your career." I read every line and felt like a stone was pressing down on my chest, not from pain, but from something long since gone cold: disgust. They were so used to living off my money that they treated it like a given. Love was the excuse, and money was the leash. They didn't need me. They needed what I provided. That weekend, I sent one single message, short and cold. "I saw the video. I know exactly where I stand in this family. Don't contact me again." Then, I blocked both of them. At the restaurant, Lily continued working as usual. She never brought up what happened, never asked a question, never offered an explanation. Every morning she arrived on time, did her job, like nothing had ever happened. I didn't know if she had seen the video, but she had been there, she heard it all. And she chose silence. Part of me wanted to explode, to scream at her. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you stand up for me just once?" But I held it in, because I knew that if I let that anger out, I'd fall right into the trap my family had always set for me, the pit of rage that never got listened to. In one HR meeting when everyone else had left, Lily suddenly stayed behind. She walked over to my desk, her voice soft. "Are you okay?" I looked up, into the eyes of the sister I once trusted. "I'm working, that means I'm okay," I said, keeping my face cold and composed. She nodded, eyes not quite meeting mine. I don't know what to say about that night. I cut her off. "You don't need to say anything, we're co-workers, let's keep it that way." No bitterness, no sarcasm, just the truth. Lily paused for a moment, then quietly walked away. And from that day forward a clear distance formed between us, not just across the office hallway, but through years of silence and chosen sides. Aunt Maggie was the only person I still kept close. Every evening I called her, even if just to hear stories about her garden or the neighbor's cat knocking over flower baskets. "You did the right thing," she said when I told her everything that happened after the video. "They don't love you the way you deserve to be loved, and you don't have to endure that for even one more minute." I didn't cry. I had already run out of tears. I just felt lighter, like the final chain had finally fallen away. The weeks that followed were swallowed up by work. I was running 3 branches, constantly traveling, attending conferences, and starting to draft the plan for our 4th restaurant. The numbers, reports, calls from suppliers, all of it became the armor I wore, layer by layer, so I wouldn't feel the cold of that fake family bond anymore. One night, as I was signing a contract with a new partner, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Rose? It's Uncle Greg. I saw the video, and I think you were treated unfairly. I stayed silent. I just wanted to say, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate. I and a few others in the family, we're on your side. Don't think you're alone. For the first time in years, I felt something faint. Not hope, but recognition that wasn't forced, but freely given. I had cut ties. No more past holding me back. No more empty sweet words. And now, I was left with only one question. If there's no one left to disappoint anymore, who will I become? I never thought a single video could shake the entire structure of my family, but I also never thought it could open a door I believed had been permanently locked. True recognition. After that video, my phone stopped ringing with guilt-tripping messages from my parents. Instead, came texts, calls, from people I thought had completely taken their side. Aunt Jenna, my mom's cousin, called from Ohio. Rose. I saw the clip. I was ashamed for my cousin. You didn't deserve that. You've accomplished incredible things. And, I'm proud of you. I was speechless. In 26 years, that was the first time I'd ever heard someone from my mom's side say anything like that to me. Then came Uncle Nathan, my dad's older brother. A man who once couldn't even remember my birthday. He called just to say one thing. You've done better than all of us. And I hope one day you can forgive, not for them, but for yourself. I didn't cry. But something in my heart softened. Not because their words erased the old wounds, but because, for the first time, I was being seen as someone with worth, not someone's shadow. Aunt Maggie, as always, remained my safe harbor. Every evening, I called her on video. She never asked about my parents, never told me to forgive or go back. She just talked about her tomato garden, the new neighbor's dog, and the squirrels tearing up her porch roof. Are you okay? She asked one night, when I was drained after a long strategy meeting. I'm okay, just a little empty. She nodded as if she already knew. When you cut off a part of your memory, no matter how toxic, it still leaves a space behind. But that space is good soil. You'll plant something better in it. I looked at the screen, her small frame lit by the warm kitchen light, and I knew. Everything I've accomplished today is because of this woman. The following week I was called into the main conference room. Mr. Barry, the current CEO and the one who gave me my first shot at the Gilded Fork, was waiting with a folder on the table. Rose, he said, with a slow smile. I'm retiring soon. I sat up straight, heart starting to race. I've watched you since day one, from an assistant manager to someone running 3 branches. You don't work just for money, but for integrity, for quality, and for people. Before I could say anything, he slid the folder across the table. I want you to take over as CEO of the entire system. I was stunned. You're sure? He gave a soft smile, his eyes filled with a trust I had only ever seen in Aunt Maggie's. I've never been more sure of anything. You're the right person, and it's time for a new generation to lead. News that I had become the CEO of the Gilded Fork spread quickly. Food magazines started covering it. A few local business papers called me the woman who rose from silence. I didn't care much about the titles, but when I saw that article, I thought of one person only. Aunt Maggie. I drove straight to her house that weekend, unannounced. She was watering flowers, back turned, so she didn't see me at first. I walked up behind her and gently placed a small box on the wooden porch table. What's this? She asked, turning around and squinting at it. A ticket. To anywhere you want. I've already booked everything. The hotel, the tour guide, the insurance. All you have to do is pack your bag and go. She opened the box. The ticket read, Venice, Italy, 10-day getaway. Oh my goodness, Rose, she whispered. No one deserves this more than you, I said, eyes stinging. You gave me everything. Now it's time I returned just a little piece of it. She hugged me, holding tight like when I was a child curled up in her lap with a book and a heart full of unanswered questions. That night, I lay on the balcony of my new apartment, bigger, brighter, and fully mine. I looked up at the sky, where city lights blended with the distant stars. A year ago, I was still the girl they labeled a parasite. And now, I am Rose Morgan, CEO of one of the most prestigious culinary chains on the West Coast, a woman who was once forgotten but never gave up. A child once dismissed, now rewriting the definition of success through her own life. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Aunt Maggie. I'm okay now, really. My story is proof that not everyone is born into love, but everyone deserves a chance to be seen and to stand tall. I was once a shadow in my own family, underestimated and used. But it was resilience, kindness, and one person who believed in me, Aunt Maggie, that helped me rise. Success doesn't come from luck, but from the courage to walk away from places that no longer value you. And now, I'm proud to be myself, no longer needing anyone's permission to shine. What do you think of Rose's journey? Have you ever felt underestimated like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next emotional family story. He said just 4 words, and my world collapsed. I gave it all to Jacob. I stood frozen in the middle of the office, the phone like stone in my hand. It wasn't that I hadn't heard him clearly. It was that my brain refused to process that sickening reality. No warning, no meeting, no email, just one cold call, and he cut off everything I had built over nearly 2 decades. I'm the only daughter of Thomas Bradford, one of Oregon's veteran businessmen, founder and CEO of Bradford & Co., a multi-industry investment firm valued at over $200 million. I joined the company at 21, fresh out of Stanford with dual degrees in finance and strategic management. For 17 years, I never missed a holiday, never skipped a single meeting. I was the name behind every expansion plan, every successful merger, every time the company narrowly escaped a financial crisis. And now, with a call that didn't even last a full minute, he swept me aside like I was some anonymous intern. I tightened my grip on the phone, listening to his voice, steady, almost emotionless. Sophia, I know this is hard for you to accept, but I've thought it through. Really? My voice caught. After everything I'd done, you're choosing Jacob? The same guy who just last year couldn't tell the difference between ROI and EBITDA? Silence. I heard him sigh on the other end of the line. A sound I used to think meant internal struggle, but now, it felt like nothing more than fake resignation. He's my son. I let out a short, bitter laugh, not because it was funny, because the pain was too sharp to feel anything else. And what am I, a walking, talking ATM? No response, just one final sentence before he hung up. The paperwork's already signed, don't make this harder than it has to be. Bit. I stared at the phone screen as if I stared long enough, it would all turn out to be some sick joke, and he'd call back to tell me I was still CEO. Still the heir to the company I sacrificed my entire youth to protect. But no. It was really over. I collapsed into the chair, eyes locked on the glass wall that faced downtown Portland. The city was still bustling, traffic crawling under golden fall trees, but to me, it was all fading away. While I'd been breaking my back balancing portfolios, restructuring branches, and battling cutthroat CEOs in the market, Jacob, my half-brother, had been partying at villas in the Bahamas, burning through the trust fund I spent years building. Not a single real day of work. Not an ounce of responsibility, just Instagram photos with wine, women, and million-dollar yachts. I used to think he spoiled Jacob out of guilt for neglecting him after the first divorce. But I never imagined there'd come a day when he'd trade me, the one who gave up everything for the company, for a chance to make up for lost time with his real son. And the worst part wasn't being pushed out. It was being betrayed by the very man who once taught me my first lesson about loyalty in business. Suddenly, I felt a chill crawl over my entire body. Not from the weather. but from something colder. That kind of cold that runs down your spine when you realize you've just been stabbed in the back with the very knife you thought symbolized your family. I stood up and walked out of the office without saying a word. The employees who used to call me the silent captain of Bradford & Co. kept working, unaware that a coup had just taken place inside the heart of the company. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stayed quiet and swore he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. I didn't break down. I didn't storm the headquarters demanding justice like some TV drama. Instead, I went home. I needed quiet, not to mourn, but to plan. My penthouse sat on the 28th floor, right in the heart of downtown Portland. Every tile, every piece of furniture had been hand-picked by me over the past 7 years. This was my fortress, and tonight, it would be my war room. I stepped into my home office and turned on the soft amber light. The glass wall reflected the image of a woman nearing 40, clad in a charcoal gray suit, hair tied back, eyes cold as steel. No longer Sophia CEO, but a cornered animal, plotting her counterattack. I pulled open the third drawer on the left. Inside was a black leather notebook. No logo, no label, but to me, it was more valuable than any legal document. This was where I wrote down everything the company's accounting system didn't dare record. The under-the-table deals, the shady loans, the questionable ties to international investment firms. I flipped through the pages. The names of the stakeholders. The timeline of the transfers. The loopholes in the capital contribution agreements. Every word was a bullet. And I had a full magazine. My father thought he was the only one who understood the company inside and out? Wrong. I was the one who redesigned the entire operational structure in 2021. I knew how every department functioned, every financial cycle, every cash flow gap. If I wanted to choke Bradford & Co., I didn't need a lawyer, I just needed an opportunity. And I knew exactly who could give me that opportunity. I picked up my phone and quickly scrolled to the familiar name, Edward Hale. He's in his 60s now, my father's longtime strategic partner, and the very first angel investor in Bradford & Co., when it was still just a no-name firm with a handwritten business plan. Edward always believed in me. He once told my father to his face that I was the only brain keeping this ship from sinking. I tapped call. The phone rang less than 3 times before he picked up. Sophia? Been a while since I heard your voice. Everything okay? I didn't beat around the bush. I just got pushed out of the company. Jacob's been given full control. Silence. Then a low curse. The old man's really lost it. I kept my voice calm, but each word cut like a blade. I'm not calling to complain. I need to meet. Tonight. Claremont Club. It's big. I'll be there. I hung up and exhaled slowly. There's something strange about having nothing left to lose. It's not comforting, but it brings clarity. The Claremont Club is where real power players meet. Not to talk about golf, but to decide the fate of markets. When I walked in, Edward was already at our usual corner table, whiskey in hand, eyes watching me, like he was sizing up a new deal. Sit down, tell me everything. So, I did. No filters, no sugarcoating. I laid all the wounds bare. And the claws too. How my father quietly transferred control. The meetings I was excluded from. The documents pulled from the system without notice. How Jacob, a guy who once blew nearly $500,000 on trash NFTs, was now sitting in the CEO chair. Edward couldn't hide his anger. He took a long drag from his cigarette, eyes narrowed. So, what are you planning to do now? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm going to rebuild, from scratch, a new company. Leaner, faster, sharper, and most importantly, strong enough to shake Bradford & Co. to its core. He didn't say anything for 10 seconds. Then he laughed. You really are Thomas's kid, but a hell of a lot smarter. I'm not looking for compliments, I need capital. How much? $3 million to start? And a few names only you can call. He took the last sip from his glass, then nodded. You'll have the money tomorrow. I didn't smile. I didn't say thank you. I just nodded. Like I'd just closed a deal. Because I had. This was the beginning. I left the Claremont Club a little after 10 p.m. Organ's cold cut through the air like a blade. But I didn't feel it. My blood was on fire. In the car, I opened my phone and started a list. Phase 1, recruitment. I didn't need a headhunter. I knew exactly who was fed up with Jacob's leadership. I'd worked with them, trained them. I was the first to give them a real shot. People like Linda Grover, head of strategy. Carl Gwynn, risk analysis expert. Ava Jenkins, the interim CFO I personally promoted. They weren't loyal to the Bradford name. They were loyal to results, and I was results. I called Linda first. She picked up on the first ring. Sophia. I'm starting something new. I want you on board. No hesitation. Send me the address of the new office. I hung up, lips curling slightly. Not everything I lost was gone. Some things were coming back, in ways my father could never predict. 11 days after the meeting with Edward, I stood in the middle of an empty office. No signs, no logos, not even a nameplate, just white walls, fluorescent lights, and a business plan covering one glass panel. Delta Strategic Holdings. That was the name I chose. No Bradford. No ties to the family. Just 3 cold, clean words. Sharp like a blade, wrapped in velvet. My new company didn't need hundreds of employees to prove its strength. I only needed 10 of the best. 10 who could do the work of 300, and more importantly, 10 who knew who I was. Not the title I once carried under the Bradford name. The phone rang. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. Sophia, I'm ready. It was Carl Nyan, the risk analyst. The one Jacob once tore apart in a meeting just for challenging a $100 million resort project in Nevada. Welcome to the front lines, I said quietly. Send in your resignation email tomorrow morning. And Carl? Yeah? Leave nothing behind, let them panic. My list kept growing. After Carl came Linda Grover, who'd worked with me for 4 years in strategy. Then Ava Jenkins, the sharp, fearless woman my father never trusted because women aren't suited for high-level finance. A week later, Malcolm Rowe, the operations director from the Chicago branch, called. Sophia, I've had enough. Jacob wants to slash the CRM budget in half to cut operating costs. Does he think client systems run on good vibes? I smiled. Then come where your opinions aren't trampled. I'm on the first flight tomorrow. Delta had no fancy office. We rented a floor in a renovated building in the industrial north side of Portland, a former factory. Cold, noisy, but thick walls, strong Wi-Fi, and 0 prying eyes. Everyone who walked in carried the same thing. Suppressed fury, and a loyalty that had never been. For Jacob. On the first day, I looked around our makeshift meeting room. An old wooden table, 10 plastic chairs, and a whiteboard packed with our 12-week roadmap. I don't need you to thank me for pulling you out of the hellhole called Bradford & Co., I began. I just need you ready to burn the old ship down and sail a new one straight past it. No one spoke. But I saw their eyes, like soldiers who'd once lost a war, now back for revenge. Linda, strategy. Carl, risk and finance. Ava, external affairs and investor relations. Malcolm, operations. I don't need any other departments, I'll handle the rest myself. I said nothing more, no hollow speeches, everyone here knew exactly what we were doing. We weren't just building a company, we were flipping an empire. Within 2 weeks, Delta had a 3-quarter operating plan, a list of 14 potential investment targets, and a nearly closed deal with a small logistics company in Idaho, a partner I once negotiated with back at Bradford. That deal had been rejected by my father for being too small, too thin on profit. Now it was the perfect starting point, small, fast, and incredibly agile. One rainy afternoon, Carl laid a report on my desk. They're burning through their budget, he said grimly. Jacob funneled nearly $10 million into a Canada expansion project without a proper logistics plan. Add that to last year's risky crypto fund investment. They're almost out of cash. I blinked, a slight smirk forming on my lips. They're burning the whole forest just to light a campfire. If we hit their main supplier next month, they'll lose nearly 35% of their operational capacity. Do it. Carl nodded and walked out. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the cold gray ceiling. Everything was falling into place. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a single knife. They were bleeding themselves dry. One Saturday night, as I was reviewing the personnel breakdown, Ava knocked on the door. "Sophia, you should see this." She placed an iPad in front of me and opened the region's top financial news site. Bradford & Co. loses 2 more senior executives amid ongoing strategic crisis. I glanced at the names. Thomas Dale, Chief Financial Officer. The same man who refused to approve the marketing budget Jacob wanted to use for a Gen Z-themed event series. Below was a brief paragraph. Sources say internal instability and lack of leadership experience are the key factors behind the recent wave of resignations. I looked at Ava, eyes calm. They're starting to bleed. Where do we strike the first blow? I stayed silent for a few seconds, then swiped to another screen. A list of Bradford's strategic contracts. I pointed to the first name. They live on blood, we'll cut off the oxygen. Delta wasn't complete yet. But I knew one thing for sure. When a forest catches fire, only someone who's lived in it knows whether to put it out or fan the flames. And me, I built that entire forest with my bare hands. Now, I was pouring gasoline. The news broke on a Monday morning, when the whole market was still groggy from a sluggish weekend session. I sat in Delta's small office, coffee still hot in my hand, eyes fixed on the computer screen, as the headline from the Portland Business Journal hit like a direct punch. Bradford & Co. fails to acquire Harland Logistics, reason: strategic misalignment and concerns over executive capability. I set my coffee down without rushing. I'd waited 3 months for this moment, and now, it arrived exactly as I'd planned. Harland Logistics, a mid-sized company in domestic supply chain operations, was a deal I had proposed during my final days at Bradford. I had handled the preliminary negotiations, signed the memorandum of understanding, and prepared for due diligence before being pushed out of the picture. Jacob took over the deal without ever reading a single operations report, and disaster followed. He was so overconfident, he proposed a take-it-or-leave-it acquisition term, cutting Harland's valuation by 15% in exchange for vague promises of international expansion. I knew Harland's founder, Michelle Evans, a sharp woman with zero tolerance for arrogance in business. When she called me 3 weeks ago, her voice was simple. "Sophia, I'm pulling out of talks with Bradford. I want to talk to you." We met that afternoon in a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. We didn't need to say much. One look, and she knew I understood long-term value. Not the type of CEO who throws money around to pretty up a quarterly report. We signed a strategic partnership. No press, no noise, just a quiet shift. But once the news broke, the financial world went into a frenzy. Within 48 hours, Bradford & Co.'s stock dropped 12%. Major investors like Fremont Capital and Northwood Holdings started questioning the executive board. A financial beacon analysis named Jacob directly as the lead negotiator and quoted an anonymous source. Jacob Bradford's overconfidence and lack of market understanding were the primary reasons Harland Logistics backed out of the deal. I read every line, feeling something indescribable crawl up my spine. Not joy. A colder kind of satisfaction. Like watching the man who pushed you off the cliff begin to slip off the edge himself. Linda stepped into the meeting room, a thick folder in hand. "We've got Bradford's operational problems here." Malcolm pulled enough from the old internal contacts. I flipped through the pages quickly. Outdated supply chain management system. Secondary suppliers left without contract renewals since Q2. Employee resignation rate at the Seattle branch hit 22% in the past 2 months. I looked up at Linda. They're walking a tightrope without knowing it's fraying. So what do we do now? I stood up and walked to the strategy board. With a red marker, I circled the phrase, indirect strike, operational imbalance. We start with the supply chain. Target their key supplier, Hawthorne Materials. They're 3/4 behind on payments, and we can use that as leverage. Carl knocked and stepped in, handing me a new report. Sophia, I've got this. One of Bradford's investors just called me. They're worried. They want to meet the person who flipped Harland. I smiled faintly. No names needed. I already knew. At the meeting, I'll show them what Bradford never could. Honesty and execution. 3 days later, I met Janet Monroe, investment director at Crescent Partners, a fund that owns 8% of Bradford's shares. Her office was on the 32nd floor of a black glass tower, yet inside it looked like an art studio. I understood the message. Creativity in strategy, but always watching from above. Janet got straight to the point. I know you're the one behind the Harland deal, and I don't blame you. I just want to know, can Bradford recover? I didn't pretend. I opened my tablet and showed her a chart of staff resignation rates, a comparison table of failed deals over the past 6 months, and short-term debt ratios that had doubled quarter over quarter. No, they won't recover. Because the man in charge doesn't understand what management means. He thinks being CEO is a title, not a responsibility. Janet stared at me. So, what do you want? I looked her straight in the eyes. I want to build a company that can replace Bradford, not copy it, surpass it. She said nothing, but I saw the shift in her eyes. No longer doubt, now, calculation. I'll be watching, and if what you say holds true, we'll consider reallocating funds. A message from Ava came in as I stepped out of the elevator. Jacob just called an emergency board meeting. Looks like the panic is real. I replied with just 3 words. Good, keep going. Because I hadn't struck directly. I was just pulling the strings. And they, the ones who thought I was a discarded pawn, were spiraling inside the maze they built themselves. And I was moving forward, preparing the next blow. That night, I was at the office, dim light from the desk lamp casting long shadows across the table, where a fresh partnership agreement with Marlowe Systems had just been signed. Ava had just left after a brief meeting. We'd won the bid for a project Bradford had chased for 4 months, and now, it was mine. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I once saw as a mountain too high to climb, now just a worn-out shadow. Thomas Bradford. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. Sophia! His voice was lower, rough and shaky, like someone who'd just come out of a long illness. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the glass wall ahead. Outside, Portland was soaked in cold night mist. Inside, I was about to speak to the man who had stabbed me in the back without a second thought. I thought I was off your contact list. Sophia, don't be like that. We need to talk. Still calling it talking? Sounds like you still don't get what's happening. He was silent. I heard a deep, heavy exhale. Let's meet. At the old office, tomorrow morning. I was ready to decline immediately. But then, I changed my mind. Fine, 6 a.m. I arrived 10 minutes early. The entrance to the once glimmering Bradford headquarters now felt as cold as a courtroom awaiting its verdict. The doorman recognized me and gave a small nod, his eyes reflecting something close to gratitude. 17th floor conference room. My old battlefield. Now there were only 2 people inside, my father and Jacob. Thomas Bradford no longer resembled the invincible figure in my mind. He looked thinner, his hair noticeably grayer, his gaze drained of power. Only exhaustion remained. And Jacob? Still in a crisp suit, but the arrogance that used to cling to him now hung loose, like a collapsing facade. I didn't sit. I stood, staring at them. Like looking at the 2 men who once threw me out of the fortress I had built with blood and youth. Talk, I don't have much time. My father took a deep breath, placed a folder on the table, and slid it toward me. We're losing control, investors are pulling out, client churn is up nearly 38%, the media is cutting us down daily. I didn't touch the folder. You just realizing that now? Jacob jumped in, his voice still laced with leftover arrogance. You can't let the entire company collapse over a family argument. I turned to him, my eyes cold as a blade. An argument? You call pushing me out, dismantling the foundation I spent nearly 2 decades building, an argument? Jacob was speechless. My father slowly stood up. I was wrong. I admit it. I didn't trust you the way you deserved, but now? I need you. I laughed, a laugh with not a shred of humor. That line should have come a year ago, back when I still wanted to hear it. You're still part of Bradford. You're the lifeblood of this company. I stepped closer to the table, placed both hands on the glass, and looked him straight in the eyes. I'm not part of this company anymore. I'm the piece you cut off, like excess flesh. And now you want to reattach it, after it's grown into something else? Stronger, sharper, independent? Sorry. I'm no puppet. My father lowered his head. In that moment he was no longer Thomas Bradford, the great founder, but a father who had chosen the wrong child. If you don't come back, I'll lose everything. I replied coldly. Then lose it. Every decision has a price, and this is when you pay. I turned and walked away without looking back. This time, I was the one who left the boardroom, and the closing door sounded like a final sentence. 2 weeks later, the financial world shook. Bradford & Co. files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I was sitting in my Delta office when Ava placed the printed article on my desk. They've started selling off assets. Where are they starting? The Venture Capital Division, Austin branch, and the IT department. I nodded and picked up the phone. Call Edward, start acquiring them, piece by piece. Ava smiled. How much of the old company are we taking back? I looked out the window. The city was blurred by rain, but in my mind, the path was crystal clear. Everything worth saving, the rest can die with the Bradford name. Never did I imagine I'd one day witness my father, the man who once called me the future backbone, sit and watch his empire crumble. But he made his choice. And I was merely the consequence he called upon himself. One morning in late March, I signed the final contract. The pen glided smoothly over the paper, leaving a clean line of deep blue ink next to my signature, Sophia Bradford. Across the table sat the legal representative from bankruptcy court, confirming that Delta Strategic Holdings had officially acquired the 4 most profitable divisions left from the ashes of Bradford & Co. Portfolio Management, Enterprise Client Services, Seattle Data Center, New York Regional Headquarters. Piece by piece, the empire I once built with my own blood and grit was back in my hands, but no longer under the old name. No longer under the shadow of a father who chose the wrong heir. Ava walked in, setting a steaming espresso on my desk. She looked at me, her voice low but filled with something close to awe. You did it, Sophia? I simply nodded. No celebration, no fireworks. I didn't need the world's approval. I just needed them to know. I was back, but this time as the one holding the knife. 3 days later, on a rainy Portland afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Oh, Mr. Thomas Bradford is here. He's asking to see you." I looked up from the file in my hands. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. The emotions I once thought would surge never came. Just a moment of silence before I calmly said, "Send him in." The door opened. The man who used to be the center of my universe walked in, but now, he was only a shadow of the past. His faded gray suit couldn't hide the limp in his step. His hair had turned completely white. The fire once burning in his eyes had cooled to smoldering ash. He stood still for a few seconds, his eyes scanning the room. There was nothing extravagant. But every detail was intentional. The power here was real, not for show. "Nicer than my old office," he said. His voice, rough and low. I didn't respond. Just gave him a small nod to invite him to sit. He looked at me for a long time, then finally said, "I was wrong, Sophia." I leaned back in my chair. No words. No smile. I simply let him continue. I was blind. I thought that because he was my son he'd carry the legacy, but I forgot. It was you who kept the company alive for nearly 2 decades. I clasped my hands together, my eyes locked on his. You didn't forget. You just didn't want to admit it. He nodded, a bitter smile flickering across his face. I lost everything. The company, the trust. And you. This time I looked out the window. It was raining. Water streaked down the thick glass, cold and colorless. Like the years I spent being pushed out of the picture. No one took anything from you. You let it go. He fell silent. Deep, long silence. If I could start over. I cut him off, my voice soft. Like a paper cut. But you can't. He stood up, gave a slight bow. Thank you for letting me speak. I didn't respond. No need, no forgiveness, no hatred, just silence. For him to feel the full weight of what he had lost. He walked out of my office. The door closed behind him. Like the end of an era, and the start of a brand new chapter. A week later, Delta Strategic Holdings officially announced its international expansion, with 3 new representative offices in Toronto, London, and Singapore. We restructured our entire accounting system under an automated integration model, and launched an exclusive investment platform for high-net-worth clients. At the first press conference since the company's founding, a reporter from Forbes asked me, "Do you think you've successfully gotten your revenge?" I smiled. A smile full of clarity and control. This isn't revenge. I simply reclaimed what was once mine. But this time, I'm keeping it the right way. And that was the truth. I never set out to destroy Bradford & Co. I just refused to keep being dismissed in the very place I helped build. They thought I'd fall, but they forgot. I wasn't a side piece. I was the foundation. I lost. I was betrayed. But I didn't scream. I didn't strike back with anger. I struck with strategy, with time, and with my mind. And in the end, I didn't just take it all back, I built something better, stronger, and more enduring. Power isn't given, it's taken. And in the end, I took it all. Sophia's story is a powerful reminder that in life and business, no one can strip you of your true value unless you let them. Betrayed and cast aside, she didn't crumble. She used her intelligence, experience, and resilience to turn the tables. In the real world, sometimes loss is just the beginning of a powerful rebirth. Power doesn't come from names or inherited titles. It comes from your ability to rise and reclaim what you truly deserve. What about you? Would you have forgiven your father if you were in Sophia's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories and meaningful lessons about family and identity. There are moments in life when all you want to do is stand up, walk away, and never look back. For me, that moment came on a sweltering summer afternoon, right in the middle of what was supposed to be a harmless family party. In less than an hour, I was accused of nearly letting a child drown, cursed out over a phone, and had my patience wrung out like a filthy wet rag. I knew my sisters could be unreasonable, but I never imagined they could be this drunk and vicious. And the worst part? It was only the beginning. My name is Ella. I'm 35 years old, living with my husband Nathan, in a small town in Northern California. We don't have kids, we both work in finance, and we enjoy a quiet life. Far from unnecessary noise. That means we rarely get involved in the family gatherings my 2 older sisters, Becky and Lauren, often organize with help from their loud and tactless husbands. To be honest, I've never been close with Becky and Lauren. They're 6 and 8 years older than me, with 3 and 4 kids respectively. In their eyes, Nathan and I not having children is selfish, against tradition, and weird. And every time we gather, they never miss a chance to flaunt their superiority in terms of being tired, messy, and busy as moms. Last Saturday, my parents hosted an early 4th of July BBQ at their house, a place with a pool located just outside the suburbs of Fresno. Nathan and I initially declined, but my mom called several times, giving all kinds of reasons like, family needs to stick together, and your dad misses you, then turned to pleading with Nathan to bring some good energy. In the end, because he's the soft-hearted one, we agreed. When we arrived, there were at least 4 SUVs parked tightly by the gate, and the sound of screaming children from the backyard echoed like a mini riot. I sighed. Nathan gave my hand a gentle squeeze, as if to remind me, "Just a few hours, you can do this." In the yard, over 20 people gathered around the grill, the food table, and the pool. Becky and Lauren already had flushed cheeks from alcohol, each holding a cocktail and laughing loudly with their husbands like it was spring break in Cancun. The kids, ages 6 to 12, were running wild like someone had tossed out the safety rules and handed out free sugar from the bakery. My mom was scrambling, trying to grill while also wrangling the grandkids, while my dad, the only one still sober, sat quietly in the hot tub, headphones in, eyes avoiding the chaos. Less than 30 minutes after we arrived, something unexpected happened. 3 kids, 2 of Becky's and 1 of Lauren's, ran toward a guest named Sharon who was standing near the pool. They screamed, "Water gun!" and shoved her straight into the water. Luckily, Sharon was on the steps leading into the pool, so she only got half soaked, but she slipped and almost hit her head on the edge. Sharon's face turned pale. She said nothing, quietly climbed out, grabbed a towel and left the party. I heard my mom mumble, "Oh dear," while Becky laughed, "Just a joke, kids being kids." I was about to say something but Nathan squeezed my hand again, as if to say, "Don't get involved." I nodded. I tried to ignore it and chatted with one of my parents' neighbors, but the next disaster came sooner than expected. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 3 other kids, 2 10-year-olds and an 8-year-old, eyeing me like they were playing a hunting game. Before I could react, they shouted, "Ella, it's your turn!" and charged at me. I jumped to the side instinctively, and the 3 of them flew straight into the pool like live cannonballs. There was a splash, some screaming, and then an eerie silence. 1 kid surfaced, clinging to the side of the pool, coughing violently. Another thrashed in the middle of the pool, clearly unable to swim. Nathan immediately jumped in to pull out 2 of them, while my mom saved the 3rd just in time. But instead of thanks or apologies, Becky and Lauren, still drunk, turned on me, yelling, "Ella, are you insane? Why didn't you stop them? You were standing there laughing, weren't you? They almost drowned." I glared at them. "Are you kidding me? I got out of the way." "If I hadn't, I'd be the one falling in. Who's supposed to be watching the kids?" Nathan stepped up. "We're not babysitters. Those kids are yours. You need to take responsibility." But reason couldn't cut through alcohol and bruised egos. A shouting match broke out, with crying kids, my mom yelling over Becky's curses. Finally, when one of the brothers-in-law, so drunk he could barely stand, stumbled over to have a man-to-man talk with Nathan, I made it clear. Word for word. "Which is way worse than what I went through with you. We're leaving. If anyone wants to burn with this mess, be my guest." I grabbed Nathan's hand and walked away, leaving behind yelling, tears, and a family party turned summer nightmare. I thought that after the chaos, things would settle down. But no. I underestimated Becky and Lauren's shamelessness. And especially the nerve of their husbands. The next morning, as I was making my first cup of coffee, my phone buzzed non-stop like there was a fire. The first message was from Becky. "Ella, the kids recorded that water shoving game yesterday on their iPhone and now it's broken from falling into the pool. I think you should pay for it." I frowned, still half asleep. The next message came from Lauren, even bolder. "Each one is an iPhone 14 Pro Max which I just bought last month, nearly $1,200 each. You can't just step aside and let the kids fall into the water and then wash your hands of it. Do you understand? It's your responsibility to stop that from happening." I put the phone down on the table, as if it had just exploded in my hands. Nathan walked out from the kitchen, saw my expression, and quietly asked, "What's going on now?" I handed him the phone. He read a few lines, then looked at me with a half-angry, half-powerless look. "Are you kidding me? Do they really think you're some kind of accident insurance for these stupid kids?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to stay silent and let things cool down on their own. But then the third message came, this time from Becky's husband, Derek. "Ella, don't make this awkward. You know you're wrong. 2 broken phones aren't a big deal for you. If you transfer the money soon, we can keep things cordial." A cordial? The only thing left after that party was the smell of cheap alcohol and stupid arrogance. I opened the new message and typed each word with my hands trembling from anger. "I'm not a babysitter. I'm not an ATM for your stupid games. I'm not responsible for phones you can't even take care of. And from now on, I don't want to be involved with any of you anymore." I hit send. Then, I blocked Becky, Lauren, Derek, and Paul, Lauren's husband, on everything, including social media. I didn't want to see anything from them again, not even a like or a picture of cold, dry roasted chicken. My mom called that afternoon, her voice full of concern. "Ella, I know you're angry. But that was an accident." I interrupted. "Mom, I'm not angry. I'm tired. Tired of always being the nice one in a family where I'm just the emotional punching bag. The kids aren't taught, the adults are drunk, and then they blame others. And now, I'm being asked to pay like I'm some walking But," my mom hesitated. "The phones are expensive. Becky says they're valuable to the kids. If they're valuable, they should be taking care of them. Don't let the kids run around like crazy, then ask someone else to pay." Silence. I heard my dad muttering something in the background. My mom sighed. "Fine, I understand. But your dad and I still hope you'll come to the house. Don't let the sisterhood fall apart like this." "Mom, the sisterhood didn't fall apart because of me. It rotted from the moment I was the youngest, forced to share candy, give up toys, and bear all the blame for 2 sisters who never made mistakes. I've put up with enough." I ended the call. That evening, under the soft yellow light, Nathan handed me a glass of white wine and didn't say anything. He just sat next to me, quietly. That silence was more comforting than 1,000 fake reassurances from family. We watched a movie, ate some toast, and then silently went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. In my mind, I kept hearing Becky call me selfish in her last message before I blocked her. They really thought I'd just bite my tongue and pay, like I had done, for all those years before. I remembered the times they made me pick up the dinner bills because she has 4 kids, I only have 2. The trips where I had to rent a big car because her small car can't fit. The birthday gifts I gave the kids, always criticized for not being meaningful enough. And now, they wanted me to pay for their carelessness again. No. This time, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't paying for the phones. I wouldn't cave in to their shameless demands. And I wasn't going to be Ella, the easy one, anymore. The next morning, I sent a brief email to my parents. "I need some time to myself. Please don't send any messages or call. When I'm ready, I'll reach out." I hit send. My eyes burned, but my heart felt lighter. Because for the first time in my life, I stepped out of the cycle of guilt they had trapped me in. And I had never felt freedom like this before. 3 days after the text and phone battle, I thought everything was really over. I didn't reach out to anyone, not Becky, not Lauren, not my parents. I didn't want to hear another word about reconciliation or family unity. Nathan and I even planned to leave town next weekend, to temporarily escape the mess called family. But then, on Tuesday morning, as I was getting ready for work, my mom called. I almost didn't pick up, but then my hand instinctively hit the button to accept the call. "Ella, can you come by the house tonight?" "What's going on, Mom?" "Your dad and we want to talk to you, and Becky, Lauren will be there too." I nearly dropped my car keys on the floor. "You want me to sit across from the 2 people who just asked me to pay over $2,000 for their mistakes, and who called me selfish?" My mom was silent for a few seconds. "I know that was outrageous. But your dad and I are tired too. We need to end this once and for all. Just come. And if you don't like it, you can leave at any time, I promise. I sighed. All right. But I won't back down to please anyone anymore. That evening, when Nathan and I arrived, the atmosphere in my parents' house was as heavy as the calm before a storm. Becky and Lauren were huddled on the couch, their eyes darting around, holding hot cups of tea, like they were clinging to the last bit of their remaining morals. Derek and Paul weren't there. At least this meeting wouldn't be interrupted by their man-to-man talks. My dad stood up, his voice deeper and more tired than usual. Everyone sit down. Today we need to make some things clear. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Nathan sat next to me, silent like a cold rock. Becky, Lauren, my dad looked straight at them, you two crossed the line. Demanding Ella pay for phones because of your kid's dangerous antics? And insulting her on top of that? Unacceptable. Becky started to speak, but my mom raised her hand to stop her. This is not the time for excuses. I read the messages you sent Ella, and I felt ashamed for you. Lauren lowered her head. Becky still tried to keep a straight face. My dad continued. From now on, your mother and I are setting some new rules. If you want to keep attending family gatherings, you have to show mutual respect. No demands, no emotional manipulation, no using the word family to control others. He turned to me. Ella, you have the right to protect yourself. From now on, no one is allowed at the mountain cabin unless you've given clear permission. I gave a small nod. Inside, a strange feeling stirred. Part relief, part bitter. And, my dad said firmly, if anyone crosses the line, your mom and I will side with the person who was disrespected. Family doesn't mean you get to walk all over each other. Becky threw a sharp look my way and said, so because of a couple of phones, I'm being treated like an outsider? I sat up straight, my voice cold as steel. It's not about the phones. It's about how you've never owned up to anything, never taken responsibility. Well, I'm done. From now on, every favor comes with clear boundaries. Lauren spoke softly. I know this went too far. But Ella, I don't want to lose my sister. I looked at her and for the first time saw a hint of real regret. Well, you didn't lose me. I just won't be the weak Ella anymore. The next morning I drove up to the cabin near Lake Arrowhead. It was a place I'd bought 3 years ago, fully in my name but had let my parents use as they wished. A peaceful retreat among pine trees, with a porch facing the valley and a storage room big enough for the whole family if needed. I got out of the car, walked through the large wooden gate, and locked it behind me. The old padlock had been replaced with a modern digital code lock. I entered a new code. One only Nathan and I knew. The old one, set by my mom using the birthdays of the 3 sisters, was permanently deleted from the system. I walked around the cabin, checking all the doors. Everything looked fine, but I still wasn't at ease. I called a locksmith to change the front door code and both secondary locks, then ordered a security camera to be installed at the entrance. Not because I was afraid of thieves. I was afraid of family. On the way home, Nathan asked, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. I don't regret giving my parents a place to relax. But from now on, if anyone wants to use it, they need to understand that this is my house. Not a public lodge, not a place to exploit, and never a place to insult the owner. Nathan chuckled. Sounds like a lawyer reading a sworn statement. I smiled faintly. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control of my life. Not living under guilt or tied to toxic family obligations. I knew this wasn't the end. I knew people like Becky and Derek wouldn't let go so easily. But this time, I was ready for whatever they were planning to throw. And I swear, I won't take a single step back. I never thought things could get worse after that family intervention. But then the truth came out. Bare, filthy, and bitter enough to make me wonder whether to laugh bitterly or scream in rage. I got a call from my mom on Saturday morning, just as I was sitting on the balcony reading. Her voice was shaking. Not with emotion, but with anger. Ella, do you know that Becky has been renting out the cabin for the past 3 years? I shot up like someone had splashed ice water in my face. What are you talking about, Mom? Your dad just found out yesterday. A neighbor next to the cabin, Mr. Gerald called him, said he sees strangers coming and going every week. He said they mentioned booking through something called Becky's Cozy Cabin on a vacation rental app. Becky's, what? The cabin you bought for us. It's being advertised as Becky's Cabin. And there are hundreds of glowing reviews. With photos of everything, inside and out. Even the private spots, only family would know about. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My whole body felt like someone had poured gasoline on my blood. 3 years. For 3 whole years, while Becky played the role of the sister who gets to use the cabin because we're family, she had secretly turned my property into her personal cash machine. How long have you known, Mom? I asked, trying to stay calm. Just yesterday, I swear. When you changed the code, Becky panicked. She started sending me messages begging to get the old code back, saying she had accidentally booked it for some friends. I got suspicious, looked up the app, and there it all was. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. Friends, huh? Or paying customers. $350 a night, $2,000 a week, sometimes even $2,000, $500 if it was a holiday weekend. She booked at least 2 full weeks each month. I sat down, heart pounding with anger. That cabin wasn't just a vacation spot, it was a gift I gave my parents after all their years of hard work, when they couldn't afford one on their own. I never regretted the money, never the effort. And Becky? She shamelessly profited off my kindness. By noon, I got a message from Becky's husband, Derek. Ella, I'm begging you. Becky's a mess right now. We've been struggling these past few months, drowning in debt. If you just unlock the cabin and let us use it a little longer, I swear nothing will get out of hand. I didn't respond. But just a few hours later the doorbell rang. I glanced out the window. Becky and Derek were standing there. Nathan came up behind me. Want me to get the door? I shook my head. No, I need to look them in the eye today. I opened the door. Becky looked completely different. Hair messy, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a stack of printed papers. Cancelled bookings from the rental app. Ella, please, you have to let me explain. I don't need to hear anything, I said coldly. For 3 years you used my property without saying a word, all while playing the righteous big sister, calling me selfish, and even demanding I pay for those kids' phones. Derek cut in. We didn't mean any harm, it's just, we've been in debt. Becky thought since it was a family asset. Family? I let out a short laugh. Don't say that word to me again. I've never been part of the family you all talk about. Becky cried. Tears fell, but they had no effect on me anymore. But you don't understand. Paul's hours got cut and we still have to pay for the kids' schooling. Yet you still had money to rent a nice house, buy an SUV, go to Disneyland 3 times a year. I saw it all on social media. You're living beyond your means. And then turning to family to bail you out? She went quiet. I continued. Starting today, the cabin is on full lockdown. Only my parents and I have the access code. I've changed every lock, installed cameras, and hired someone to inspect the place weekly. If any of you show up there again, I'll call the police. Derek flinched. You're serious? Dead serious. And if I find out you're still illegally renting it out, I will sue. Every dollar made over the last 3 years. I have the right to demand compensation, plus interest and penalties for property rights violations. Becky choked out. Ella, I'm sorry. Too late. Once trust is broken, no words can fix it. I slammed the door before they could say anything else. That night, I called my parents. My dad was silent for a long time after I told them Becky and Derek had shown up. I'm so disappointed, not just because of what Becky did, but because I believed my kids still had some decency left. My mom's voice trembled. I used to think that love alone could prevent things like this, but now I see love can't be an excuse for someone to walk all over someone else. I held the phone, my hands ice cold. I never wanted the family to fall apart, but if maintaining a relationship meant being used, insulted, and treated like an endless wallet, then maybe it should have fallen apart a long time ago. And I knew one thing for sure. The truth was only just beginning to come out. I thought after Becky came to my house, crying and begging, they would be ashamed enough to back off. But I was wrong. Not just wrong, but foolish to believe that people like them knew when to stop. 4 days after that confrontation, on a quiet Friday evening, Nathan and I were having dinner with his family in Napa when my phone started buzzing non-stop. I didn't bother checking at first, assuming it was some ad notification, but when Nathan glanced at the screen, his expression changed completely. "Ella, you need to see this." I grabbed the phone, more than 20 missed calls from the same number, unsaved. A flood of messages, mostly from my mom and some unknown numbers. But what made my skin go numb was a notification from the cabin's security system. "Unusual movement detected. Main camera reports intrusion." I opened the security app. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the footage. The gate had been broken. A gray SUV was parked right at the entrance. Then the image came into focus. Derek and Paul, 2 men I used to call brothers-in-law, were using a metal cutter to break the gate lock in broad daylight, like common thieves. I nearly screamed in the middle of dinner. They broke in? They actually broke into the cabin. Nathan immediately called the property manager, his name was Brent, who lived nearby, and was hired to monitor the place regularly. Brent said he'd already seen the alert, had called the local sheriff's department, and that officers were on their way. I left the dinner table, my heart racing, ears ringing with rage. An hour later, Brent called back. The police got there in time. The 2 guys had broken the front door and were trying to open the back storage when they were caught on the spot. They tried to claim they were family and had usage rights, but once I showed the video and the ownership papers, the officers didn't say another word. They just cuffed them right there in the yard. "Did they resist?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Derek yelled, and Paul, he threatened to smash his bitch sister-in-law's face in, his exact words, right in front of the police. I stood frozen. The next day, I went to the police station to confirm the incident and file charges. I brought everything: the deed, the transfer documents from my parents, the security footage, and even Derek's previous messages begging for access. The officer on duty, a woman named Ramirez, flipped through the paperwork and nodded. "This is enough. These 2 are being held on 3 charges: unlawful entry, property damage, and personal threat." "Are they eligible for bail?" "Yes, but it's the weekend, so processing will be slow. Honestly, they're a mess right now, and their wives don't have the money for bail. We suspect this wasn't the first time they've used that cabin to make money." I stayed quiet. A slow-burning fury rolled in my chest. I looked her in the eye. "I want to press charges. No compromise, no forgiveness, no withdrawal." "Understood. We'll be in touch if more evidence is needed." That night, my mom called, crying. "Ella, can't you let this go? They're family." "Mom, this wasn't an accident. They brought tools, broke locks, and forced their way into my property like criminals. They threatened to kill me. Do you understand that? But Becky's falling apart and the kids don't know anything. Now their dads are in jail. That's the consequence of their actions. No one forced them to do it. They chose this path. Please don't plead for them." I heard her sobbing on the other end. My dad spoke just one sentence, slowly and heavily. "If you forgive them this time, you'll make yourself a victim forever." I sat still by the window, watching the streetlights flicker like they were about to go out. My heart didn't go cold. It was burning. I had had enough. Enough of so-called family love, used like a chain or a club to beat others without shame. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd cave. They forgot I locked that gate not just with a code, but with years of clarity earned through suffering. I swore there would be no room for mercy. I was mentally prepared for a long legal battle. Paperwork, lawyers, courtrooms, and a string of hearings that smelled like gunpowder. But what arrived by express mail to my office on a cold, rainy Wednesday morning left me speechless for nearly a full minute. A white envelope, delivered by priority service, addressed to me. Labeled, "Personal documents, please open privately." Inside was a handwritten letter and a check for $5,000. Signed by Derek and Paul. I collapsed into my chair, reading line by line with cold, shaking hands. The letter was written clearly, without flourish or excuses. And what shocked me most was, it was sincere. "Ella, we know we crossed the line. There's no excuse for breaking in, destroying property, and threatening a family member. We lost control. And the price we're paying is fair. This is a partial payment to cover the damages. If more is needed, we will send it. We ask that you consider dropping the charges. Not for forgiveness, but so everyone can return to a normal life. We're willing to sign any terms including no contact, no approach, and complete forfeiture of any access to the cabin. Once again, we are sorry." I didn't know whether to be angry or laugh. My emotions splintered, twisting between relief and disgust. It wasn't until I sat down for dinner with Nathan that I regained a bit of clarity. "I think they're afraid of losing their jobs," I said, pushing the letter toward him. "Paul has a sensitive security clearance. A criminal charge would cost him everything." Nathan nodded, finished reading the letter, then looked up. "They didn't write to you out of remorse. They wrote because they're desperate." I gave a bitter smile. At least this time, they managed to write complete sentences and actually sign their names. The next day, I met with my attorney Catherine Shaw, who had been following the case closely since I filed the complaint. I handed her the letter and the check. She read it slowly, then let out a long sigh. "Honestly, this is a chance to end everything cleanly. If you agree, I'll draft a civil agreement, which will clearly state, no contact in any form. No approaching or entering any of your properties. No claim of usage rights, no future disputes. And if any terms are violated, you have the right to sue immediately, with no prior warning." "Can I still keep the money they sent?" I asked, my voice low. "Of course. That amount is restitution, and if they agree to sign this document, I suggest requesting a final payment. If repair costs exceed $5,000. I nodded, feeling heavy, yet seeing a faint light at the end of the tunnel. 4 days later, another check for $2,500 arrived. This time from the credit union where Paul worked. No one had to tell me. I knew it was Paul who arranged it. Along with the check was a message from their attorney, confirming both Derek and Paul had agreed to sign the civil agreement without modifying any terms. My attorney, Ms. Shaw, sent me the final draft to review and scheduled the official signing. I read the agreement over and over again. All parties agree to no communication or contact, direct or indirect. No one other than Ella or an authorized representative may enter the property located at. The offending parties confirm full compensation has been made and waive any right to reimbursement, litigation, or future civil claims. If any party violates this agreement, legal action will be taken immediately. When I signed it, a strange feeling filled my chest, like cutting out a hardened tumor. It hurt, but it healed. That afternoon, while I sat alone on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky red, my mom called. I knew she would ask about it. I hesitated, then picked up. "They've signed. I've agreed not to press charges. But don't expect us to go back to the way things were." My mother's voice was as faint as a breeze. "I understand. I just hope you don't carry hatred in your heart forever." "I'm not carrying hatred, I'm carrying boundaries." I hung up, then closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Real peace. Not fake, not forced. And I knew, from now on, my life would have no room for the old kind of forgiveness. The following Monday, I signed the final legal agreement in Catherine Shaw's office. The room was so quiet I could hear the pen scratch across the paper, each stroke like driving a nail into a door that was slowly, permanently closing. Outside, the sky was gray and damp, but inside, I felt a strange lightness. Not because I had forgiven, and not because justice had fully prevailed. I simply wanted the fight to end, so I could move forward without carrying the past like a weight. The agreement was nearly 20 pages long, carefully outlining every clause like a life or death contract between people who were once family. Nathan and I signed, Catherine signed, the other side, Derek, Paul, Becky and Lauren, had signed over the weekend. The agreement clearly stated, none of them may contact me or Nathan, in any form. If communication is necessary for legal or property matters, it must go through legal intermediaries. They are forbidden from coming within 300 feet of my home or workplace. All usage rights and access to the cabin are permanently revoked. Previous rental income will not be reclaimed, unless tax violations are discovered, in which case they bear full legal responsibility. The final clause made me close my eyes for a few seconds before signing. I could no longer sue them for anything that had already happened. In exchange, I kept the full $7,500 compensation, and had guaranteed safety going forward. After all the paperwork was complete, Catherine closed the file, her eyes serious but filled with empathy. Ella, you did the right thing. Truly. This isn't weakness or letting go. It's control. It's reclaiming your agency. I nodded, said nothing. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to act strong. I just wanted to go home, make a hot cup of tea, turn on some soft jazz and forget everything. That afternoon I drove up to the cabin one last time, not to check on it, but to close the chapter with my own hands. On the way, I didn't play any music, just let the wind through the windows carry my thoughts. The house was still peaceful, tucked beneath rows of green pines. Brent, the property manager, had replaced all the locks as requested, rechecked the camera system, and sent me a list of minor replacements needed over the next year. Nothing serious. The house stood strong as the day I bought it, only now it was no longer stained by the greed of relatives. I walked around the yard, ran my fingers along the railings, the stepping stones Nathan and I had laid 3 years ago. Each corner of the house reminded me of my parents, of the times we sat drinking coffee, playing cards, watching the snowfall. Some memories are still beautiful, still pure, still intact, even if the people in them no longer are. Before I left, I hung a small wooden sign on the door that Brent had engraved at my request. Private property, authorized persons only. Any trespassing will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. A reminder, a statement, a boundary. That evening, in the living room, bathed in warm yellow light, Nathan handed me a glass of wine. I didn't drink. I simply held his hand, silent. You done, right? He asked, his eyes fixed on me, waiting for confirmation. I nodded. It's done. From now on, I'm no longer the one staying silent out of fear of conflict. I no longer live to please those who will never appreciate me. Nathan smiled, his smile carrying a sense of release. He hugged me, and for the first time in months, I felt like I no longer had to fight just to survive. I don't know if the future will bring Becky and Lauren back, whether indirectly through my parents or through some emotional game. But one thing I know for sure. I've locked that door, both legally and in my heart. I don't need them. I don't owe them. And I won't let them hurt me again. It's over. Not because I forgave, but because I took back my life. My story isn't just about a cabin being exploited. It's about the journey to reclaim ownership of my life after years of being dismissed and manipulated by my own family. Sometimes, boundaries aren't built with soft words but with law, determination, and doors that must be locked forever. Forgiveness doesn't mean continuing to endure. And love, if not accompanied by respect, is merely an excuse for others to legally violate you. What do you think of Ella's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way to protect herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling real-life family stories.